than the story you hope that they will pretend they care about. He's going to help us create the content that the media is interested in. Does that sound like a good idea? Sound like fun? Yeah. All right. Who would like some PR and media coverage? All right. 5, 6 people. Fantastic. Anybody else? All right. We need more coffee. More coffee. All right. I want you to take that energy level up by 100 as we welcome to the stage our next speaker, Jeremy Knauff. Come on. There we go. Let's feel it.
All right. So that uniform that Chad used to wear when he was a flasher apparently doesn't fit him anymore. It's kind of unfortunate, but thanks for the intro. So let me get a quick show of hands here. How many of you guys have been at some point featured in the media? All right, looks like we got a decent number of people here. Awesome. So today, what we're going to talk about is how to tell a story that makes journalists want to feature you. And I will preface this by saying most people get this completely wrong. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of background on how I got to where I am, because this is relevant to the story here. I had run a full-service marketing agency for most of my civilian life, and then I got blindsided by a health crisis that almost killed me. Spent 2 years on my deathbed and basically disappeared from the marketing world. And in doing that, I basically became no one. So I leveraged public relations to put myself back on the map, and things blew up so much bigger and so much faster than they ever had before that. And that was when I realized this is something that everyone needs. So we basically took that same approach that I used myself and started applying it for other people. I will also warn you guys, I am not PG-13, so we're probably going to hear some things. If you have sensitive ears, just stick your fingers in there. So let's talk first about why you need publicity. The first is that it speeds up the sales cycle. Publicity builds trust, so you're not having to do as much of the dog and pony show that you typically have to do when you're talking with a client. You've got that authority, you can skip through a lot of the bullshit, and you can get right to the meat of the conversation. It also lets you charge higher prices, right? Think about this in the context of an attorney. If you're cited all over the place and you are handling very high-profile cases, people know that you're capable. People know that you're the best of the best. So you can not only pick and choose who you work with, but you can also charge higher rates. And this applies across every industry. And then it also helps you to attract other opportunities. When you reach out to people, they'll be more receptive. But also people will see you and reach out to you because they want to be aligned with you and what you're doing. But not all media is created equal. Is Michael in here right now? Michael King? We don't want to be on some media though, right? That was a rough night for Michael, so let's just not be too brutal about that. But what we do want to do is get featured in media in a way that presents us as an absolute authority. So this was a piece that one of my clients was in on Fox Business, homepage, top of the page, and they listed him in the subtitle. They've got his name. But then they are calling him a financial expert. That is a huge authority piece, and it puts him in a very different category. So this is the type of stuff that we want to get in, right? And I will say there's a lot of nonsense media out there. We don't want to waste our time with that. We want to be in the right places, framed in the right way. And the only way to do that is to understand what the media is actually looking for. So what do you need to know before getting started? The first is that it's not about you. Now I know that may sound kind of counterintuitive. The reality is the audience comes first. All right, whatever you're talking about has to bring value to the audience. Then you have to meet the needs of the media people, whether it's a journalist, an editor, a producer. You have to solve their problems. You, unfortunately, are last in this equation. But if you handle it from the perspective of the audience first, then the media people, you're going to have a lot better outcome when you're pitching. So drop the diva shit. Nobody cares about you. They care about what you bring to their audience. And then you need to demonstrate expertise. Now, I know a lot of you guys are doing that in a big way with what you're doing on social media, and that is a huge component of this. But you have to actually talk about how you do what you do. I know you guys all understand that from a social media perspective. This also matters huge when it comes to public relations as well. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. And then the other is that PR is only part of the equation. So far too often, I see people get featured in the media. They'll go put it up on Facebook, put it up on LinkedIn. Hey, I'm so honored to be featured in here. I'm talking about X, Y, Z. And then nothing else after that. They don't do anything else with it. There's a ton of content that you can create from every single piece of publicity that you ever earn, and most of that is going to be evergreen. So each piece of publicity could turn into potentially a few dozen pieces of social media content, and then if you continue to use it, you can share it in other ways, right? So you can continue building more content from that publicity, and that's keeping you in front of your audience. Now, I also want to point out, you want to avoid these three dangerous PR mistakes, and I see so many smart people and a lot of dumb people make these mistakes. The first is misrepresenting anything. I'm sure all of you guys know someone online who's full of shit, right? Raise your hand. Do we know somebody? Okay, awesome. So we all know those people. That always comes back to bite you in the ass, right? When you lied on the resume but still got the job, eventually you're going to get exposed. There was a guy several years ago that I ran into. I don't know if any of you guys in the room know him. Patch Baker. Does anybody know that name? No. Okay. Within the circles that I traveled in where he was, everybody thought he was the best thing since sliced bread. Every time you would talk to this guy, oh, I just bought another company. I just bought 3 more companies. We hit 100 million in revenue. We're 120. We're 200 million in revenue. Every bit of it was bullshit. He ended up conning me at one point, and I did some research into him, background check, whole 9 yards, and found out that basically his entire story was a lie. And that kind of pissed me off because he was a Marine Corps veteran, but he was lying about his service to sucker these people in to what essentially ended up becoming a Ponzi scheme. So I took a special interest in him going away. SEC came after him. $12 million Ponzi scheme. Absolutely destroyed. And there's nothing he can do to come back from this. And to get a little bit away from the PR side for a second, things don't start off this way most of the time. It's usually a little white lie. Let me exaggerate this a little bit to land that client. Let me stretch the truth a little bit to get on that stage. And then those little lies start piling up. And then you have to keep topping them and topping them and topping them. And then you end up running a $12 million Ponzi scheme. So don't misrepresent anything. It will always bite you in the ass. The other thing we want to avoid is automating follow-up. Now, I know a lot of us probably have some killer funnels. We're marketing to our prospects. We've got killer automation sequences set up. We don't want to do this with a journalist. And the reason for that is if they didn't respond to your pitch, it doesn't mean they just need 7 more emails. It means the story wasn't a fit right now, or maybe it's not a fit at all, or maybe they just don't like you, or any number of other things. But if the story is not a fit, sending them more email is not going to change anything. But you can keep pitching them other stories later. Just don't automate the same pitch. Don't automate follow-up. At most, I might send 1 follow-up. If it's a breaking story, maybe 1 or 2. And most of the stuff that you guys are going to be pitching to a journalist is not going to be breaking anyway. So I usually just stick with one pitch. If it doesn't go anywhere, then I regroup and take a different approach next time. And then the other one is offering to pay journalists. Yeah, you're basically telling them that you think they're a prostitute. Not a good look. You're going to offend them, and if you get caught, you will end up on a blacklist. Most people don't realize there are private blacklists that media people, the journalists, the producers, the editors, anchors, all of these people share these private blacklists. So if you fuck up with a journalist, you could very well be on a blacklist, and you could be pitching great stuff, but because you're on that list, you're going nowhere with it. So skip that. It's only going to backfire. There was a guy who got blasted at Forbes, and he had a couple of other columns as well, and he was actually accepting money for this. What ended up happening was he eventually got caught. Every single thing he had ever written for all of these publications got deleted. The people that were in them, they were definitely looked at with a lot of skepticism, and it made it a lot harder for them to ever get featured again. But that guy was toast as well. All right, so we're going to follow these 5 steps instead. Now, I will say we're going to cover some things that are not directly about the pitch, but all of this stuff is foundational, right? There's other things that go into basically telling a story that the journalist is going to see that doesn't even happen in your pitch. So the first thing is to build a personal brand. Now, I know that's something you guys all obviously understand very well. You guys are all active in this area. You want everything consistent across the board, right? Header photos, your profile photo across all the platforms should be the same. Your search results for your name also is part of your personal brand, right? What does somebody find when they look you up? Do they find just your own stuff? Do they find other outlets talking about you, other media outlets talking about you? Do they find negative stuff, right? Your reviews play a role in this as well, right? So we want to make sure we've got a good image if somebody goes and looks you up. Because when you pitch a journalist, let's say you absolutely crushed it. It's a great story. Fits what they cover. Great timing. Something people are already talking about. Then they go and they look you up online, right? Just like dating. For all the single folks in here, before you go on a date, what do? You Google somebody, right? Journalists are going to do the same thing because their reputation is on the line with every single story that they put out. So they are going to look you up. If you have a knowledge panel, that's something that indicates authority. That's something that's triggered in Google algorithmically. And a key part of that actually is from publicity. If you're featured in authoritative media outlets, Google will algorithmically create a knowledge panel for you across the top and down that side. It's not something you can apply for. There's no way to ask for it. It just happens algorithmically from these authority signals that Google finds. You don't want to sit out here and say, I'm the best, all right? Because it doesn't mean anything. Who else says that they're the best? Everyone, right? So if you're just out here bragging about being the best instead of really building a real brand, you're going to sound like everyone else. Okay, so we're going to tell a story instead. So Dr. David Phelps, client of mine, we'll be talking about him a few times throughout this presentation. He used to be a dentist, ran a very successful practice, and then he was blindsided by his daughter's health crisis. Late-stage liver failure, epilepsy, and leukemia, all at once. Absolute shit show. He looked at the situation. He looked at what had to be done to get her through this challenge in her life, and it was very clear to him that he was not going to be able to continue running his dental practice and support his daughter. So what he ended up doing was he sold his practice, dumped all the proceeds into real estate, and then started focusing entirely on real estate, which gave him a lot more flexibility and time. Now that's a hell of a story, right? That's something that gets people's attention. It pulls on the heartstrings. Every one of you has a story like this. It doesn't necessarily have to be a negative situation. It could be a positive situation, but everyone has one of these powerful stories. You just have to dig into it, right? You have to find it It's not a matter of creating it, it's a matter of distilling it, right? So as a result of leveraging that, that was a key part of how we got him featured in some of these pieces, right? There's the pitch itself, there's the information, the meat, but there's also the emotional component, and you have to cut through the noise with something emotional, okay? In order to do that, though, you have to understand your audience. Now, for those of you in the room who are a little bit older, like I am, who can tell me what this photo is? Absolutely, the Challenger space shuttle that exploded. Now, what was different about Challenger compared to any of the previous space shuttles? Absolutely, a teacher was on that space shuttle, Kristen McAuliffe. I've got, wow, that's kind of like the horror movie music there, huh? Okay, so I was in elementary school. I don't remember, maybe second, third grade when this happened. You guys remember how that used to go? They'd pull out that giant TV on the big metal cart, for those of you who are like in your 40s and above. Giant monstrosity of a CRT TV, and you knew it was going to be a good day because you're going to be watching TV. You're not going to be doing schoolwork. And that space shuttle, you know, you've got all the pre-launch stuff that's going on, and then they finally get to the liftoff, right? 3, 2, 1, liftoff. And the space shuttle flew through the sky for about 1 minute and 45 seconds. And then, boom. Now here we are, 30-something kids, in my class anyway. Obviously kids all over the country saw this, but we watched this all happen live. My teacher was absolutely dumbfounded. And she was so surprised that she didn't even know what the hell to say. So she turns to us and says, well, class, is there anything you'd like to say? So I'm looking around, and it's getting really awkward. So 7-year-old Jeremy raises his hand. Yes, Jeremy. I think they should send more teachers to space. In case you're wondering, she did not react the same way that you guys did. But she was not my audience. The other students were my audience, and that resonated with them. They thought it was hilarious. The same is going to apply when you're pitching. What's going to resonate with one journalist will turn another journalist off. You have to understand exactly who you're talking to in order to pitch effectively. And that's why I'm such a big proponent of not just blasting out massive pitches to a whole bunch of people all at once. You want to tailor it to each person, okay? So the other thing we have to do is we have to control the search results, traditional and AI. Okay, so I touched on that earlier in the brand part. You don't want someone to look you up and they just either find nothing or find some sketchy shit, right? Hey, Michael. We got to get you a new car, brother. So the knowledge panel, like I said, huge asset for you guys if you can trigger it. If you've got videos out there, those will show up in the search results as a little call out. Images, especially high res, and especially if they're hosted on authoritative websites like IMDb in this case. A lot of your posts can sometimes end up in the search results. If you've got books published, that's another good way. IMDb. Now, I know some of you guys may think, well, shit, I haven't been on any movies, at least none that are out in the public. But, yeah. You can actually list your podcast here, though. If you've got a podcast, you can list it on IMDb. I will tell you the user interface sucks, but it's worth the effort because it does provide a lot of authority. It does put another entry into the search results, and it can be very helpful for you from a branding perspective. 60% of search users received an AI summary in their results. 37% of consumers start searches with AI instead of Google today. And AI results are more trusted than paid ads. So this is huge. You have to be in there. You guys want to go into all of these AI tools and start asking them about you. What do these tools say about you? What are they saying about you as a person? What are they saying about your expertise? Do it across the board, ChatGPT, Grok, Gemini, the AIOs in Google search, which are often horribly wrong, by the way. So part of the information comes from your own website. We're going to kind of glaze over this part a little bit because we can go super deep technically, but we're not going to have time for that. Your own website does provide some information. Social media does as well. And when I say social media, Reddit is a big part of this, unfortunately. If you haven't been on Reddit, it's a cesspool of the world's worst people. Tier 1 media, Fox News, CNN, Forbes, Entrepreneur, Fast Company, things like that. And also press releases, although that is starting to become less important because people have started to figure out how to leverage press releases to game AI. And then websites that LLMs train on. Now I do have a slide towards the end of the presentation that you guys can download a whole bunch of resources. I've actually got a whole list of the websites that AI tools train on in that downloaded zip file. The next thing we're going to do is build our media list. Now I know what some of you guys have heard, but size doesn't matter here, okay? It's all about relevance. It's all about relationships. Okay, so when we build our list, you of course can use tools. You of course can buy lists. I don't recommend that. The tools tend to be more expensive than most of you will need to spend because you're not going to be constantly pitching at the scale that somebody with a PR firm would. So instead, what I recommend is if you go to a lot of the websites, Wall Street Journal, for example, you see that little email icon? You can right-click on that and copy their email address right from there. You can also go to X, put in a particular outlet you want, and then go down and look at all the people who work for that outlet. Now, when it comes to X, just be careful. You want to make sure that it's somebody who's actually a journalist there and not just somebody who was featured there and then they mention it in their bio, which is why they show up there. And this is the only use for LinkedIn pages that I've ever found. Go to a media outlet page, click on that People tab, and you're going to see everybody that lists it as their employer. Now you can connect with all those people. Super simple. But it really does come down to the relationships. Case in point, I had a client who we had a weekly syndicated television show across like 27 markets. So we were setting her up for that coming week's show. The producer reaches out and asks me if I have someone who could talk about AI bank scams. Well, yes, I do. I know a lot of people. So I connected him with a guy. He was actually at a mastermind event with me that afternoon. He was back home the following morning, interviewed on the show. Producer texts me back and wants to have him back more. That all came just from my relationship, okay? So treat this as a long game. Now we're going to pitch our story to the journalists. This is where it starts to get lots of fun. We have to grab their attention. Not like that. Whoops, did we miss a slide? Oh man. Anyway. All right, so I like to open with a startling statistic. Did you know that the greatest cited fear that people have above death even is public speaking, right? That's a statistic, and there's probably a percentage in there, right? But that would be an example. Or you could say X percentage of Tampa Bay homes are currently entering into foreclosure right now. That grabs someone's attention. You could say 32% of plumbers overcharge based on XYZ, whatever it is, right? Those statistics are going to grab their attention and make them want to read past that. I like to keep that at one short sentence. We want to keep it short enough they're going to see it and not just think, TLDR. They're going to actually see it. It looks reasonably short, so I might as well go ahead and read it. And once they've read it, if it's of relevance to them, if it's of interest, then they will go ahead and continue reading, which now we expand with the impact statement. So when we were working with Dr. David Phelps, we would open up with a statistic and then break into the impact statement, how that would affect individual consumers. In fact, I've got a better example right now because we just did this one. Trump's proposed 10% interest rate cap on credit cards. Sounds great, except it's not. All of the studies, all of the research, and even real-world data show that that will limit credit for most consumers. And I don't remember the exact percentages off the top of my head right now, but the American Bankers Association and I think it was the New York Fed, both had case studies where they had actually put caps in certain states. And then because of that, because now the credit card companies would be running at a loss, they had to pull credit from the people who had, like, say, a sub 700 or sub 720 score. That's a pretty big impact for a lot of people. So when you can explain how that statistic impacts their audience, now they're going to start salivating. Now they're going to see the story. They're going to see how their audience will find this valuable and what impact it will have. So now you're really getting into a story that makes sense for them to cover. Then we need to explain why you're the right expert for them to feature. Now, if we go back to David Phelps, he built a massive portfolio by doing exactly what he teaches now, right? What he teaches is based on what he did. So when he talks about his investing community that he runs, he talks about the portfolio that he has. He talks about how he's done things in the industry that shows his expertise, right? But we don't want to make this too long. We don't want this to be this life story. We want it to be just enough to demonstrate your expertise, and then they're probably at that point going to go look you up online and see what else they can find about you that further supports that, which is why we talked about some of the other stuff with the search results, the personal brand, the content on social media, all of that stuff. Now we're going to leverage our hero's journey story, all right? Now we tie in the emotional aspect to this. We're talking about, with Phelps, we can talk about how his daughter's health crisis led him to not only save her and help her go on to live a successful, happy life, but how that then led into this investment community that he runs that helps lots of other people build their own financial freedom, right? And every one of you guys has a story like this. Even if you don't realize it, even if you think you don't have one, and if anyone who thinks they don't have a hero's journey story, find me somewhere, we'll talk for a few minutes, and I promise you I will dig one out of you. And then we're going to close with a call to action. Now, we're not going to be desperate. We're not going to be needy. We're not going to say, hey, it would be my honor to be in this story. I would love this. This would be great, blah, blah, blah. None of that. That makes you sound desperate and needy. I like to close with insouciance. If this is a fit, let me know and I'll make the arrangements to make it happen. Simple, clean, and it shows that you're not desperate. You don't need it, but you do want it, and you have the expertise to bring value to that story. Okay? And then, like I said, we're not gonna automate the follow-up here. If they don't reply back, it's just not a fit, and that's okay, move on. Come back and pitch a different story in a week. We want to keep it short. I like to keep my emails typically less than, say, maybe somewhere in the 200 to 300 words range max, okay? If they see a wall of text, they're going to say, nope, delete, okay? The shorter it is, the more likely they are to read it. We also want to break it up into bite-sized chunks. Subheads, bulleted lists, bold and italic. If you want to get a little crazy, you can even use like highlighting in the text. But break it up so that they can just quickly scan through that email, and the words that grab their attention are what's going to keep them reading, right? They're going to see whatever they want to see. They're going to see whatever's relevant, whatever appeals to them. So when you break it up this way, it's a lot easier for them to see that. And last is when you write your subject line, because you need a smooth transition from that email sitting in their inbox to them starting to read your pitch. All right, has to be a smooth transition. It has to make sense. It has to flow. I've seen people try to use kind of shocking headlines. I saw somebody once, this was in a private group for journalists. Subject line was, "Fuck you." That didn't work very well. So make it relevant and make a smooth segue, and that will keep them interested. And then last, we're going to leverage our publicity. There's a million ways that you can create a mountain of content from every piece of publicity. Easily a few dozen pieces of content, but you can continue doing that over time. So you guys are already experts. I think you all deserve to be recognized as one. So that's a wrap for today, guys. If you want to hit that QR code, that will give you access to the entire slide deck from this presentation. I've also got a personal brand guide. I've got a PR strategy workbook, identifying real versus fake media outlets, which is huge. There's a ton of fake ones out there. How to respond like a PR pro workbook, and our Getting Cited in AI Tools guide. All of that is free to download. If you just hit that QR code, it will take you there, and that's a wrap.
All right. Woo! Go ahead. Go, by all means. I'm just here in the background.